Geographers, how we doing? All right, you ready to make a map? That's the plan. That's what we're going to do here is we're going to make our first official ArcGIS produced map. So in order to do this, what we first need are the data files, which I have stored in Canvas. So log into Canvas, go into our class page here, and go over to Files, as you see on the left. And within here, there are a handful of different things. But the main thing, what we're looking at here is this data folder. Left click on that. And then within here, you'll see a whole bunch of things. We'll be using these at different times. You might see other ones pop in or change, but this is where I'm going to put everything I have y'all work with throughout the semester. This is the easiest way I've found in the absence of a robust IT infrastructure at the college is the easiest way to just get some files out to students quickly, whether it's through an online class or even in the lab. So this is how it's going to work for the semester and honestly in most of the GIS classes you take with me at Antelope Valley College. All right, so what we want is this South America folder. And within here, I have a handful of files, what we call shape files. I'll explain what those are when we actually download them in a bit. But these are GIS data files that will actually, populate our white screen in ArcMap with some actual geographic data, right? So to get this to your computer, the easiest way to do this is just to go over here to where we have these three dots, circles, whatever they are. Left click on that. And where it says download, left click on that. And it'll prepare this thing up here. Think a little bit. And then when it's ready, it should download it. I'm using Chrome, just so you're aware, which I recommend to use because it's the easiest to use with Canvas. But if you're using something else, it may, ask you if it's okay to download something, figure out where you want to save it, whatever. Hopefully you can figure that out as you're working through. And if it's not making sense, get Chrome, do everything through there because it should look anyway exactly what mine looks like, right? To make life a little easier for you. All right, so from Chrome, I hit download. It automatically downloads it. It puts it in this little lower bar here. And what I want to do is I want to figure out where it is and go to this location to actually see this zip file that has been downloaded. So the easiest way is just to left click on this little arrow thing and go to show in folder. And sure enough, it put it in my downloads folder. So it's right there, ready to go. We're not going to keep it in here. We're going to actually move this to a different location, and I'm going to spend a little time with all of this because this is one thing. This is a huge thing with GIS. When you really start working with this stuff, you want to be deliberate in where you're placing things on your computer. It's very easy to get lazy and just to let these things go to default locations. In fact, a lot of the stuff you're probably seeing in my downloads folder here, it's probably me being lazy and just not deleting stuff I don't need, moving stuff, whatever. But when you're really working with GIS in a professional sense, like you're not just messing around, but you're actually trying to produce something, whether you are working professionally or if you're doing things academically, like everything you're doing in this class, be deliberate with where you put these files. Yeah, that's the goal here. For now, though, let's talk about what a zip file is. For those who don't know, maybe you've worked with these, maybe not, but all it is, when you see that .zip extension, is we've taken existing files. As I said, these are shape files. We'll see what those look like in a bit. But we've taken a collection of these files and we've put them together, bundled them up, and also compressed them so that the file size itself gets smaller. And this makes life easier if you're trying to send a bunch of files, either through email, from some kind of FTP server, downloading from Canvas or whatever. So it keeps everything together, and it makes it easier to transfer this stuff, right? That's all a zip file is. And then to access these files, we need to unzip this file, right? So to do that, I'm going to right click right here. Now, most computers these days, they come with the software embedded to be able to do this automatically. What I have here, what I'll be using, what I'm going to encourage you to use, is this 7-zip program. It's free, open source software. I'll have a page in Canvas explaining how to download it and, from where to download it, all of that. But this is the 7-zip program. It's got more capability than what your average Microsoft default unzipping program can do. That's why we use it. As we start to play around with data files and finding data from other parts of the web, we'll see. It's not always simply a zip file. There are other compression programs out there, file types out there. 7-zip, from what I've seen, can handle them all. So I'm going to encourage you to load that onto your computer. Use that. If you don't have it, this one's pretty simple. Whatever it says, I don't know if extract all might be the default thing that you get, or whatever it says. Unzip, extract, something along those lines. You can use that, but as I said, I recommend getting 7-zip. And what I'm going to do from here, pretty simple. I'm just going to say extract here. Okay? We'll see what this looks like. Sometimes it can get messy. I think it's going to be okay with this. So I'm going to do that. Beautiful. Look at that. Oh, mwah. Worked beautifully. I've got my South America folder right here, ready to go. And it's accessible. All right? I can actually start clicking in here, messing with this stuff. And you note it keeps that original data underscore export, right? The original zip file is still there. I don't need it anymore. In some cases, maybe you do want to hold on to it. For me, to keep this simple and so I don't get confused, I'm going to right click on the original and hit delete. All right. So that way I don't have to think about that. Now with my South America folder, I don't want to keep this in my downloads folder because everything's just going to get piled up in there. It'll probably get lost. It's not good practice. So instead, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use the ArcGIS kind of default folder in your documents folder. All right. And to show this, we have documents here. I'm going to right click on documents and say open in a new window. There are other ways to do. I'm just doing this so that it's easy for you to see exactly what I'm doing here. So this is my documents folder on this specific computer. And you might have a few different things in here. But one thing, when you load ArcGIS desktop onto your computer, it's going to create this ArcGIS folder. And if I click in there, you'll see a few different default things. One, this default .gdb, it's a geodatabase. We'll look at that in a second through Arc Catalog. We've got a handful of things in here. We'll leave them all alone. Don't delete anything. Don't mess with anything unless you know exactly what it is you're doing. All right. Some of these things, if you delete them, the next time you open up ArcGIS, it might put them right back and it might be fixed. But every now and then, when you start messing around with some of this inner stuff, these folders and files and things like that, sometimes you can really screw stuff up. All right. So it's best to just let it be. But what you can do within here, if I go back here, I'm just going to left click, hold, and drag South America right in there. And I'm going to get into this habit of putting all of our Geography 205 data into here, right? And so when I'm working on this first South America map, I'm going to have my data already in this folder, and I'm going to save map files and anything else into this South America folder. And that way, if I get confused, if something's not working, whatever it might be, I know where to look. I know where stuff should be, where it should go. All right, this is just good practice here. So we're going to work through that. You're going to learn to do that. Try to be as obsessive about proper data management and storage and all that as I am. It makes life easier. I'm not, naturally like this. It's really a case of having this GIS work just be a disaster enough times to where I went, okay, I gotta get serious with this stuff. And another thing, this is kind of an old school convention, but you note this underscore in here, right? It's not South and then space America. It's South underscore America. You want to get in the habit of not using spaces ever with your stuff. ArcGIS, it's much better than what it has been initially. Back in the good old days, folks, it was a case where if you had a single space, it would screw everything up. And you wouldn't really necessarily understand why it wasn't working right off the bat until you realized, oh yeah, that one file or that one folder, I put a space in it. That's why my whole thing crashes every time I try to do something, every time I click on this or run this or whatever. So it's good practice to either do this underscore deal or have, like, see where it says project templates here. It's all one word, but you use capital letters to help make it more readable. Whatever you want to do, however you want to do it, just don't use spaces. You dig? That's key. Maybe less key than it used to be, but still, if nothing else, this makes you look like you know what you're doing and you've been doing this for a while. All right. So I can close my downloads folder now. I'm going to look in here. Let me just double click on South America. And what you're going to see when you do this, like what we see here, is you have, like, to start out with cities.cpg, cities.dbf. And I'll say, if you aren't seeing this, if you just see cities, and not the extensions here, we can fix that. If you go to view, so see up here in these tabs, I clicked on view, and yeah, right here, file name extensions. That should be checked. Okay, if you uncheck it, let's see, only a few of them disappeared. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's the known types here. But yeah, you want to see the difference here is the whole idea. So if you are a GIS person, you're doing this work, make sure you have file name extensions checked. For now, this hidden items thing, you can leave alone. So when you get a little deeper into working with GIS, sometimes you need to dig further into Windows to find certain things, access certain things. For now, we're going to leave it alone. The reason why they're hidden typically is because most people never need to deal with them, and if you mess with them in the wrong way, you can screw stuff up. All right, so that's the idea there. But make sure you can see all of these extensions by checking that. I also have it in this details view. Some people like to have, these different kinds of views. Whatever, it's personal preference. For me, the idea is details is the most useful when working with GIS stuff. So that's just what I got into the habit of. File size can be important often. This date modified stuff can be important. You can turn on different things to see too. But this, to me, this is just the best way of dealing with this GIS data. All right, so that's how I would recommend setting up your computer here. All right, so in here, all right, we have cities.cpg, cities.dbf, and so on. So like 8, 9 different cities things here. Then it goes to countries, and we have the same deal, a bunch of different countries, all the same name, different extensions. Okay, lakes, lat long, and so on. So these make up a shapefile. All right, so we have one city's shapefile according to ArcGIS, but it's comprised of these different files. All right, so all of these go to make what we're going to see when we go into ArcGIS going to be this cities. I'm pretty sure it's a point file that we're going to see. So these little points all over the map, these South American cities, it exists in GIS because we have all of these different files in here. If you delete any of these, it's not going to work. It's going to be useless for you. So be very careful with this stuff. If you want to rename these things, maybe you want to call it like South American cities or SA cities or something like that. What you have to do is make sure, if you're doing it in here, make sure that you do it to every single file, right? Because the way ArcGIS knows to read this shapefile, project it, put it where it needs to be, do all the things that it needs to be able to do with it, it's looking to the files that all share that same name. All right, so it's best to just leave it alone in here unless you have a reason for changing that name. But again, change it on all of them. All right, also same thing. If you're going to move stuff later, put something in a different file or send something to someone or whatever, you have to send every single file here or move every file or whatever. So I just bring this up because it is important. It's kind of weird if you're just used to working with, say, a Word document or Excel spreadsheet or PDF or whatever. Those are just one single file. When you start working with GIS, quite often you're dealing with this situation. All right, hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, these are the data files we're going to be working with in here. But we don't really want to work with this stuff in here. Within this, File Explorer, Windows Explorer, whatever they call them, this thing these days, we don't want to simply work in here unless we need to. It was good to move this stuff and unzip this stuff in there. But when we're doing the real work, what we're going to do is we're going to go into ArcMap. And we're going to do everything through ArcMap and ArcCatalog and all of that. Okay? So now get into ArcMap. Open it if you have not yet done so. And we're going to bring these files in. And so one thing, too, I did not mention when we were doing the unzipping and all that, is that a zip file, it's invisible to ArcGIS. Again, it's the software. I probably said it before in one of these videos. I'll say it again. It is absolute garbage when you think about how much this stuff costs and how long it's existed and the work that's gone into it and all that. It's shocking. Some of these things that it cannot do. But it's also the case, I think, quite often that a lot of us GIS software users, the people who are doing this stuff, we just haven't been loud enough, vocal enough, and ESRI being that monopoly effectively, they could kind of say, like, what else are you going to use, right? So it's a whole issue. But yeah, that zip file cannot be seen here, which is why we have to go into Windows, unzip it, put it in the place. So once we've done all that, once we've got the data in the folder where we want it, right, then we can start playing around with this stuff. So I'm going to open up ArcCatalog. And let's go in, where did I put it in documents? Yeah, look at that. So I set this up beautifully. I think it'll be in here, right? Or is this the other one? See, I've got too much stuff going. No, it'd be this one. Yeah? No. God dang it. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this. I should have done this before. I'm going to disconnect you. And I'm going to disconnect you. And I'm going to disconnect you, and I'll disconnect you. All right, and I'm going to disconnect all of these things just to make sure that this stuff works, because I've run different iterations of the software and I've got different cloud things and all that. So let's just start fresh. So you may see all this stuff in here, but I'm just going to start this fresh like I showed in the last video. Connect to folder. All right, I'm going to do this PC, documents. Well, see, that's the same thing, but now it works. Okay, so that's just to get to my documents thing right off the bat. What you'll notice too is up top here, it defaults to this documents.arcgis. I'm going to hit refresh. There we go. Yeah, so if you don't see, so get this. And this is because, again, don't get me started on this, but because I had this already open, all right, that's the issue. It's not updating. It's not looking around or seeing if new folders exist. If you're dealing with like the actual Windows, or even on any other, a Mac or whatever, the operating system, it's worked in there with the file explorer, finder, or whatever, to keep looking for stuff and keep updating. Not the case in our catalog. So what I had to do, because South America wasn't there, is I had to right click and hit refresh, and then it showed up. Okay, same thing here. So it'll automatically be in here. So these are the same spots here. Okay, so I like to have this kind of redundancy in here, and I'll do another one for the desktop and all this stuff in there. Right, different places, my Google Drive and my OneDrive and all these things. But if you're saving stuff the way in which I'm telling you to do it, it will always be in this home documents ArcGIS, and it'll just make life easier for you as you go to make stuff and find stuff and all of that. All right, so I open this up. Ho, check that out. Yeah, so it just says cities, countries, lakes, lat long, rivers, right? And then .shp. So if we go back here, we've got, again, all these different files, but what Arc Catalog is doing is it's just combining them. It's just showing us, hey, we have cities.shp. We have a cities shapefile. Hey, that's it. Because honestly, when I'm working in GIS here, I don't need to know about all these different files that exist. ArcGIS is going to handle that. It's going to do what it needs to do to make sure I can see this stuff. Okay? So that's one good thing. I've just attacked this software, but that is one good thing here, is that it can take these wacky file types and put it all together and make it a little easier for my human brain to function, right? And this is another case, if I wanted to rename this, I can right click and hit rename. Let's test this. This should work. I'm going to put SA and then shift underscore. All right, I'm going to do that. Okay, so it updates that. Let's see, and it automatically did that in here. That it turned all these to SA cities. Okay, so that's pretty cool. I didn't have to do it, this redundant work. Right? So that's a nice thing as well. So once you've got your GIS data where you want it to be, what you're going to want to be doing is working through Arc Catalog or Arc Map in general or whatever. Hopefully this all makes sense, why you would want to do this. Okay? All right, so from here, we can do a few things. Got some options here. One thing I can do is I can just click on one of these, like countries. I can left click and hold and just drag it in here, and you see the little plus thing that shows up. I let go. Voila. All right, I've got my my countries of the world, all the countries that are there. Okay, so I just clicked and dragged. Another thing, let me see if I click and drag the whole folder. Okay, yeah, it's not going to let you do it. I can never remember exactly what you can do with these different file types and all that. Okay, that didn't work. So an option is I could click all of these and drag it in. Another thing you can do, if you don't need to work in Arc Catalog, is I can go up here to add data. Okay, and if I click on that, so it's this like yellow diamond with the plus, I can go in here. I've got, okay, same thing. I'm in Home, Documents, ArcGIS, going to South America. I can click and do, left click once on lakes and then shift and click on that South American cities, grab them all and hit add, and it will throw everything on there, right? To make it a little easier than clicking and dragging and all of that. Two different ways to bring stuff in. Both are perfectly fine, right? Like I've said, I think in the previous video, there are a handful of ways to do stuff here. Ways that, 3 different ways to do one thing, 5 different ways to do this other thing. You just pick the way that you like, that you're most comfortable with. Okay, all right, so we've got our data in here. Right now, this looks like garbage. It might be kind of exciting to start bringing this stuff in. It was for me. When I started, it was exciting to just do this, to just have this power here to be able to pull things in and remove stuff and all that. But what we're going to do we're not just going to stop here. We're going to learn how to make this actually look like a real map. All right, as we get going. But the first thing we want to do before we start playing is we're going to save. All right, we're going to save and actually create what we call an MXD file or ArcMap document, as you see down here. So what this MXD file is it's a holder. It's not going to actually save any of the data. Okay, the data will still exist as separate shape files. But what the map document will save is which shape files we brought in and what we do with them. How we change things like color. We're going to turn on labels. We're going to zoom in. We're going to do all sorts of that kind of stuff. That's what this map document saves. So we don't have to start over every time we want to work with the data. All right, so what we'll do, we'll save it in South America. And we'll just, to keep it simple, I'm going to call it South _America _ my name. All right, so that I know what it is. I also know if I'm a student in a class and I upload it to Canvas or upload a file, I should say. You're never going to upload these MXDs, but still, the final product, we'll get to that when we get to it. If I'm uploading something to Canvas, I always like to have, as a student, I would want to have my name attached to it so that if the professor has to download stuff to work with it, to do whatever, it's really clear which one is mine, right? It's just, again, it's a kind of obsessive file management. And I say that as an instructor who has had to deal with multiple confusing files and dealing with Canvas and all that. It's nice to have your name attached to this stuff. So that's what I'm going to do right there. I'm going to call that. I'm going to hit save. And you can see it shows up in our catalog. If I go back in here, right down at the bottom, South America Paces.mxd. All right. But again, as I said, it doesn't actually contain the data. So let's say you wanted to share what you've done with somebody else. You don't just send that. Because if you do send it and somebody, like through email or whatever, and somebody opens it up, they're going to see nothing. What you'll see is this will be blank. You'll have these things listed here, but they'll all have this red exclamation point next to them. And it's because you didn't actually send the data as well. Or if you did, it doesn't know where to look for it, and we'll deal with this stuff more. But that's why in this class, what you're going to do when you're turning in work is you're going to export everything to a PDF. That final map that you have, right? So you save it as a PDF, so it's the standalone thing that you can then easily upload or email or whatever. All right, that's the idea. Okay, so we save this, good. All right, and we'll continue to save it. As I said in the last video, it's a case where it's not a question of if it will crash, but it's when this program will crash, especially when you start doing a lot more complicated work. So it's great to start out, save it before you do anything. So you've got that. And then just after you do everything, just keep hitting save, right? Either clicking this button or Control S, or if you really want to, some people just like going to File Save because it makes them feel like they're more in control. I think if you're clicking more stuff or whatever. But yeah, you just want to save as much as you possibly can here. All right? All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. Since this is South America, we don't care about North America or anybody else here. So I'm going to zoom in to South America to start with, just to make this a little more clear. I'm also going to just close catalog because we're done with it for now. So to zoom in, a few different ways. The easiest way, I think, is this little plus magnifying glass right here. Okay? So you got a few different ways to do stuff. You can just bring it down here and go to the center of South America and left click once, and it'll zoom in just a little bit. All right, but that would take forever to just keep clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking, right? And that doesn't look very awesome when you do it. So the way to really use this is you're going to draw a rectangle around the space in which you want to be working, looking at all that, right? So you left click. I just by default, just kind of by years of doing this, I left click in the upper left of that rectangle. or in this, the northwest of the rectangle. So you left click and hold up here, and then you start dragging it, and you see it draws that rectangle. And so I'll bring it down to that southeast or lower right corner, and then I let go. And then it goes right to the spot. Okay? And it's okay if it's not perfect. If you don't quite like it, we can refine it, right? Let's say you just wanted Peru and you kind of screwed that up, or you couldn't tell where Peru was. So you could then go here, and you're like, aha, beautiful. Okay? If you also screw up, whether there are a variety of things. Sometimes students, I love it, when they start doing this, they'll do something like that. Just a little box, and they'll go, oh, and you have no reference and you don't know where you are. Not a big deal. Few ways to get out of this. Number one, this is one I use the most probably, is this go back to previous extent. If I screw something up and I don't know what's going on, you hit this, and it takes you back to that last extent to which you zoomed, right? And same thing, I can go back out here. All right, maybe you like it, but it's kind of it's okay, it's not great or whatever. You could just click this. Like if I want to go in just a little bit more, I could click that again, right, just to get a little tighter. You also have this fixed zoom in as well as fixed zoom out, so I could do that, and it's just going to do it in the center of the map as well. So it's going to do the thing, and it's just a little more, right? Maybe I don't like that. Let's go back out. Or you know what? I actually liked it, kind of liked it better. You could go like that, right? No, not quite, right? And you can keep kind of messing around with that stuff. Let's say you've also just screwed it up so much, and you've done so many of these things, and you don't like, I don't like it. You know what? Hit this. Full extent. The globe takes you right back out to everything, and you can start over. All right? So a few different ways to zoom in, zoom out, and don't worry about getting perfect in here anyway, and I'll show you why, but we're going to, like that final product, the final thing we're dealing with, we're all going to work in layout view, not this data view. So it's not, you just want to get into a place where you're comfortable, right? To see what you need to see. Okay, so beautiful. I love this. This is great. You know what I'm going to do? That's right. I'm going to save. Okay, so that if this does crash, I don't have to zoom in again. It wasn't that big a deal to get to this point, but I'm just going to keep doing it. It's a good habit, right, to develop. Okay, now we're going to explore what we actually brought in here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory of GIS as well as we're going through here. I'm going to left click out here to highlight all those things. So you can see we have, 5 different shape files that we brought in, and they are separate. Okay, so we have our South American cities. That's separate from our latitude and longitude lines. Those lines are separate from our rivers, right, that we have in here. So we've kept all of this separate, and we call these layers, hence the thing right here. Okay, so these different layers, that's the good stuff. That's what makes this so powerful, right? It's not that we're making some digital map. We can find digital maps all over, right? Do a Google image search of just map, and a bunch of these things will pop up. The problem, though, even if they're great maps, they're static, right? They're dead. They're just they're a picture of a map. These layers, what we can do in doing this is we can add what we want. We can also, temporarily turn it off, right? Or turn it back on. We can do that. These things, because they're separate and independent, I can have an infinite number of combinations of things with what I've got here, as well as other things I can add in here. All right, you're only limited to the data available, and what you can think to do with it. So that's the really cool thing. That's what made GIS so important, was what we were able to not just look at a map and think about it, but to really make that map what we needed it to be, and manipulate it and change it and do all sorts of things. That's the cool stuff. And so you, as a future GIS specialist or analyst or professional, however you want to refer to yourself, what you're learning to do is how to manipulate these layers and how to do this in a way that's meaningful, right? Critically, scientifically meaningful. That's what you're getting trained to do. That's what you're going to be paid to do. That's the skill. It's an art. It's a science. There's a lot behind this. And it might not seem like a big deal. I mean, this was huge, back in the 90s when I was first introduced to GIS. This kind of stuff was like, oh, like you could spend a whole day just on like clicking, turning this on, turning this off. That blew our caveman minds back then. These days, you've done stuff like this, I'm sure, in an app, some web-based thing, whatever it might be. So it's not quite as exciting, but still, even though you can do this in a lot of stuff, it's still amazing, like what you can do here. So that's a key thing. All right. Another great thing is like, okay, so look at this, these latitude and longitude lines here. Maybe I don't like it. They take up a lot of space, right? Here's a cool thing. What I can do is I can left click on lat long and I can click and drag, still holding on to that left click. I can drag it underneath to the very bottom. And you see that it disappears from South America itself. In fact, let me turn off these things right here. So we have our countries, right? And the lat long. And so what happens is ArcMap, it's going to draw in the order in which it's set in this table of contents, right? So think of what's on the bottom here of the table of contents. It's going to be on the bottom of your map. So the very first thing it draws is this latitude and longitude shapefile. So we get those lines in here. And then once it's done drawing that, it's going to draw the countries on top of that. All right, so where we don't have countries, you can see lat long. Where we do have countries, you can't see it, right? And then lakes, it's going to draw, you can see Lake Titicaca right there, drawn on top of the countries so we can see it. If we had it down here, it disappears, right? It's on, but we can't see it because of that drawing order. And so that's something to think about. If you add something and you can't see it and you get confused, quite often it's, oh yeah, I need to drag it on top of that other thing that's hiding it, right? I can do rivers. That's on top of there, right? And then the cities, because it's at the top of the table of contents, it's the top layer on the map. It's the very last thing to be drawn. So no matter what, you're going to see the cities. Nothing is going to be covering them because nothing's drawn on top of them. All right. And with any of these, again, you can just click and drag. You can change the stuff however you want. All right. That's, again, this is cool stuff. This is going to give you a lot of power as you move forward. All right. If you can't move this stuff in here, check up here at these different buttons that we have. So right now I'm in list by drawing order. When I have that, I can move stuff around. This next one, say list by source, it's showing where on the computer the data files exist. You can't move stuff around in this case because you're not changing where it exists. It's just letting you know where the stuff exists on the computer. And it might seem like that's frustrating. Like, why would you do that? But when we start working with tables and some other things that don't necessarily get drawn, then this is actually useful. Okay. And there's a whole, host of different things here. But for now, we're just going to keep everything in this list by drawing order. So if you're having an issue here, can't click and drag, check that. All right. Another thing that we can do here, right, is we can turn this on, but I mean, it's like I don't know if this was the goal at ESRI, but ArcMap, when you bring this stuff in, it'll just pick some kind of default and quite often hideous colors. Yeah, it's just what they do. And in fact, if you're playing along at home with this stuff, you brought this in. You might not have this kind of mint green color to the countries. Yours might be some kind of pastel pink or orange or yellow or whatever. But really, with whatever it decides to bring this stuff in and display, you don't want to keep it that way. All right, that's a big rule in working with ArcGIS is never let ArcGIS default some of these basic things for you. All right. You want to have some agency here. You want to pick what these colors are going to be. And maybe Like, let's say with countries, maybe I like green. Maybe that's kind of cool. We got the Amazon, it's green. I mean, that's a makes sense, right? But I'm not going to leave it like this because this looks like, well, really, what it looks like. I left it like this, right? It looks like I don't know what I'm doing. It looks like I'm some ArcGIS rookie. If I were to look at a map that looked like this, even if it's a good map, even if the analysis that went into it seemed like, quality stuff, it's telling me something great. But if I see these defaults in there, it doesn't matter. I'm going to question it. I'm going to say, I don't like it. I don't trust it because they left the defaults in there. Maybe that's snobby on my point or on my part, but, so be it. You want to think about that. Don't give somebody a reason to discredit your work simply because you were too lazy to change this stuff, right? So we're going to fix this here. Okay, we'll start with the countries. We have a few different things we can do. We can easily just left click on the swatch down here, this little green rectangle, right? If I left click on that, it brings up this whole symbol selector, and you have a few different options. They give you some default things in here. Okay, a few notes on this. Number one, again, it's default. It's going to look a little better. Like with this jade thing, I think it's the exact same color, but it did make the outline black. All right, so if I hit that, I hit OK. Well, that looks a little tighter, I think. I like it a little more, but again, it's kind of defaulty. So, you've got that. But you could click on these just to look and see what they look like. Fine, but we're going to do it a little better in here. You also have some of these. Right? Where it's radiation overlay. How awesome is that? I'm going to hit OK. Oh, cool. Except it hurts my eyes, much like the radiation would. It's too much. We don't want to do that. Use those things sparingly as you're, playing around with this stuff. You really only use it when you absolutely need to. Same thing, like some of these, they look kind of cool. It's cool, but it does muddy it up. And it can take forever to draw, to display. It's the kind of deal where your map is going to start lagging. It's going to start thinking way more and you're going to get frustrated. So for what we're doing, we're not going to do any of that. In fact, I'm going to click on this just to get out of that. But click on the fill color and you've got all these options in here. Okay? Different things we can play with, little better collection of colors. You can also have this more colors. If you know anything about, the RGB or hue, saturation, value, any of these things, you can, deliberately mess with them. Yeah, and you can also just kind of play around with the sliders, right? And see what's going on in there and decide whether you like it or not. Okay, that's the idea with that. With the more colors thing, I talk about this stuff a little bit in this class, spend more time on it in the cartography class, but that's something you can play around with. But I'm just going to pick something. No, I'm not going to do that. I like. I'm not going to pick this blue because typically we think water, blue, and all that. So I'm going to look at some of these. It's not really speaking to me. You know what? I'm going to pick that one just to go with it, just so I don't get too fussy. But you guys take your time with this stuff. Feel free to get fussy. And then what I'm also going to do is the outline color. I don't want it to be this black. I'm going to go for kind of a darker brown. Oh, leather brown. That sounds adventurous. Let's do that. All right. So I like that. That way, these borders are they're subtler than the black, but they also complement the color I have. All right, so I'm kind of going for like an old-timey kind of look at map there. I'll go with this, right? Same thing. If I were, and here, let me show you this too. If I right-click on countries and go to properties, and it's thinking, won't crash, beautiful. And I go into symbology, I can mess with the same stuff here. Okay, as well as do other things. We'll deal with this other stuff later on in here. This is another way to access this same stuff in here. But same deal. If I were to I don't know, I wanted to go for some kind of pink thing. Maybe I get that darker one. I hit OK. Look, I can hit apply right there. Same kind of deal. So you want to go for these complementary colors, things that work together. You want to make this look pleasant, right, as you go through. And I always have. I have students who start doing this, and they just, I mean, they're just like, everything must be hot pink, and they want to do this. I mean, you can if you want, but don't yet. You want to walk before you fly. Right? It's one of those deals where let's work on something subtle and nice and kind of generically pleasant before we push. Right? That's what we want to do here. All right. So what, I don't even remember what I had. I think I like that Tecate dust. Beautiful. And what was it? Leather brown, or is it? Oh yeah. Okay. That's got kind of an Indiana Jones sound and vibe. Very colonial. All right. I'll go okay with that. So I changed that color. And you can go in and change this other stuff. Right? Now with like this lake one, we do have this default. This one's totally okay for you to use if you want to, because it looks right. And you can get with the rivers. They've got a river one here, and you can hit OK, and this stuff will all kind of match. See what's going on there? It's looking more pleasant. And, feel free to do that. What you can also do, this can be kind of cool, is don't go for the default blue, right? Stick with your theme, you could stick with blue, right? But we could do something a little darker there to kind of, match with the brand to make it look a little more old-timey, right? Or maybe, sorry, this is what I do. I just start playing with stuff. What if we do, I don't totally like all of these, but hell, let's just stick with that. You can play with these colors and just have it look more like an old-timey map with a more, kind of single hue that's going on there. A whole host of things you can do. Feel free to experiment, but again, try not to go for shockingly terrifying and instead go for something that is pleasant. All right, and finally with your cities, you can play around with different things here. Instead of this weird kind of diamond point thing, you can do this. I'll warn you though, that default 18, way too big. I don't know why they default to that. So you can just, you can slide this down, or you could type in just a number and hit OK. That looks a little better. Maybe I want it even smaller, right? Maybe not. Maybe I don't like that black. Maybe I want to do another brown thing, right? So it kind of blends in a little more. Drop that down to, I don't know, a 5, right? So there are different things we can do. All right, and right now I'm going to hit save. All right, I'll stick with this. I encourage all of you to play around with this, right? Don't be satisfied with the first thing you come up with. Experiment. Go for something that looks cool. Okay, that's key here. All right, now another thing that we can do too, since we're dealing with color. So in layers here, I'm going to right click and hit properties. So this is my data frame. All right, so these are the properties for how everything is being handled in here. We're going to spend time, we'll mess with these different things that we have. But for now, I just want to go into this frame tab. I'm going to hit the drop down and go ahead and pick. They give you, this again, very weird. They give you a few options here. I'm just going to hit this. I'm going to hit this. Yeah, I'll do. Well, but gray could look kind of cool. I'm going to hit gray. And I'm going to hit apply. All right. And so it takes that white background and just makes it gray. All right. Now, as I said, it gives you a handful of things. It does give you this gradient deal, which can be kind of cool. But if you want to mess with it, you can. Get into properties and all. I'm not going to dwell on this right now, but feel free if you want to. But let's say I pick something like this. Yeah, I hit apply. Then I click on this color. Then I can get back into all of these, right? And mess with colors and all of that. But this, you can do the gray. You can do blue to make it look like the actual ocean, right? I'm going to stick with this gray though, I think, and then you could go in and you could make that the same gray. Oh, that would look cool. And then I could see, this is the fun. This is why, and I'm more of I'm a cartography guy. I can't help it. This is the part that gets me going, but I can change that. I don't remember exactly. I think it was like this one, maybe. But just to play around with the stuff. That's what you should be doing. We're just making a sexy map right now. That's what we're trying to do. Okay. Beautiful. So we got all that stuff in there. Now the next thing we can do the next thing we're going to do, by God, is we're going to hit save. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at another thing that really sets GIS apart from everything else here. Okay? And that's the idea that not only can we do these layers, but within here, if we right click and go open attribute table, what we find, let me open this up a little bit. Open it, come on, mouse, this way, is that underneath these layers, kind of hidden from us until we start really messing with it, we have this attribute table. We have data within here about every single, so this was the cities one, right? So every single point here has all of this connected to it, right? So, and in fact, what I can do, so this is the attribute table itself. Let me say this. So we've got the name. We've got some stuff, this feature ID, shape, object ID, these things. It's going to look weird and not make sense. And the good news, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff here, right? City name, it's pretty obvious. What's the name of the city? And it gets into more administrative stuff as well, and kind of more, nerdy political geography stuff in here. What country is the city in? Status, provincial capital, which provincial means like a state capital, like Sacramento in California. That's a provincial capital versus a national capital, right? Like Washington, D.C. All right, so you can see some of these things and other, just kind of big cities in the area. Population rank, population. So a whole host of things. And what's cool is we can select things in here. And we'll be doing that later on. I'm not going to mess with it too much in here. But you can do things like, okay, I've got the population numbers. Maybe you feel like, I don't know, that's way too many cities to have, right? In fact, let me show you this. Before we get into this, we'll do it this way. Let me do a few things to make sure we're clear here. Number one, I'm going to click this identify tool. It's the blue circle with the white lowercase I in it. I'm going to left click that to select it. You can see my cursor has that I right there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these cities. Okay. And what you'll see is it pulls up just for that specific city, those same bits of data that were in the attribute table. And I can click on other ones. Right? So I can just move along here and click on all these other ones, and it's going to give me all this stuff. Okay? All that, so you can see how it's connected right there. You dig? All right, so that's one thing. Now, another thing we can do, let's go to right click, and we're going to hit label features. We can turn that on right there. And if we come in here, you can see Cusco and all the other cities I was just clicking around on in there. So it's just automatically labeled these things. Now, sometimes it works great. It gives you the field you want. It's pulling from that attribute table. So that's where it's coming from. That's why it's putting Cusco here, because in the attribute table it says that's the name, Cusco, right? So fantastic. Sometimes it doesn't work necessarily. So what you'd have to do is right click and go into properties, and we go into the labels tab. And so maybe you don't want it to be, the city name. I mean, it's silly. Of course we want it for that, but you can hit this drop down label field and select whatever you want in here. Okay. If I want to do country name, don't know why I would do it, but I could do it. But you can see, right? All of these in here in Peru have Peru. All those in Bolivia have Bolivia, right? That's the the idea there. But I want, of course, city name because that makes more sense. And so that's pretty cool. We can just instantly label all the stuff based on the table, right? Now, one thing though, it's this Arial 8-point font, very default. We don't want that. It can be kind of hard to read. It's not very exciting. So you can click the drop down. You can play around with this stuff, however you want to label it. You can make it bigger, right? And hit apply. Boom. There you go. That one's a little harsh for what we're doing here, but you get the idea. We can do whatever we want. We can also mess with the color, right? Again, to kind of make it, blend in, but still be visible. Go with our theme. We can make it bold. We can make it italicized and hit apply, and voila, there you go. Typically, though, italics, we save that for rivers, for bodies of water, and things like that. I'll get into some of these conventions as we go, so I don't really want to do that. But I can do whatever. I can play around with this stuff, and I can hit OK, and I can go back out here. And so here's the deal. This is what I was getting at with, maybe it's too much, the cities that we have, because if we're zoomed out to the entire continent, we've got all these different cities out here, and ArcGIS is going to try to figure out the best way to fit these labels. Okay, automatically the computer's doing this, and if I move stuff around, I can hit this pan hand here, just click and drag. As I start to move, it's going to move stuff around a little bit. If I zoom in, actually, let's do like this. I've got a number of these. It'll change where it is putting these labels, right? So it's what we call dynamic labeling. It's great just to save you some time, but with something like this, you can see it's kind of a pain. And there are a few different ways we can mess with this stuff. But what I'm going to show you here is if I right-click on South American cities and I go into Properties, what we can do is go into Definition Query. Okay, this tab here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, computer, I want you to just show the cities that meet these criteria. Okay, that's what we're doing. Now, unfortunately, we have to talk like a computer, right? We have to speak in computer language so that the computer knows what to do. I can't just start typing, hey, computer, how's it going? And here's what I want you to do. Can't do that. So we go into this query builder, and it populates a lot of this stuff because we're not computers and we can't necessarily remember this stuff. But it's saying select, I don't know why there's an asterisk, from South American cities where, and I'm going to say, let's say we have, was it status? Let's try status equals, get unique values. And we have a few options here, right? Maybe we just want to show national capitals. Now what I could do is I could just do this one. I double click that. So status equals national capital. I can hit verify, and it says, yeah, it's cool. I get what you're saying. I, the computer, understand you. And I can hit OK, and then I can hit apply. And you notice a bunch of stuff disappears. But here's the problem. With some of these capitals that exist, Lima and Brasilia and all these others, they're more than just a national capital. They also, here, let's go back down here. We also have a national, and it's also the provincial capital at the same time, right? Or we have this national capital and provincial capital enclave right there. So we want to include those two. So what we would have to do is say status equals national capital, or status equals national and provincial capital, or status equals, we'll throw this one in, 2, right there. And we want or, because you might think like, well, you want and, because you want all of these things, right? But no, because what that means is if we said status equals this and status equals that, the computer would look for both instances at the exact same time, and it would return no results whatsoever. But what we're saying is, look, computer, I want the status to either be this, or I want it to be that, or I want it to be this other thing. And as long as it's one of those three things, grab that one and draw that one. And if it's not one of those three things, don't draw it. You dig, and the computer says a dig. All right, so I'm going to hit verify. It works. I'm going to hit OK. And quite often, when you do this stuff, I'm going to go back in here. If you hit verify and it says there's an error or whatever, it's because you have a space where you shouldn't have a space, or you have the wrong kind of, a single quote instead of a double, or things like that. I mean, it's that picky, which is why I find it nice, even if I know what I'm supposed to be doing, to just double click or single click these different things, just kind of build it in there. But if you get an error, quite often it's as simple as you've got an extra space in here. So I'll hit OK and I'll hit apply. Beautiful. And then I get these things that I was expecting to see. All right. So that's an easy way to only have, and you're going to get some issues in here when you get up into like these, Caribbean islands. It can get messy. You get some of Central America, smaller countries with these big names in here so close. Maybe it doesn't quite work. And you can go back. If I come back here, go into labels, maybe 16 is a bit much. Maybe I'll do 12, right? And I'll apply and see if I like that. Maybe it's just the font. Maybe the font is difficult, so I'll change that, right? And there are other ways, maybe we'll get to in this class later on. There are ways to get more aggressive with how this stuff works. But for now, just kind of play around with this and get something you like. But that definition query, feel free. You can do it this way. You could also say maybe you don't want that. You could get into population, right? Here, let's do population, get unique values, and it shows you a whole host of values. This -999, it's like a no data or something. I don't know what's going on or why there's a 0 in there, but you can see the rest of the stuff looks pretty decent. Maybe you just want the cities where you could hit population is greater than, and just, 1 million or something like that. Up to you. How you want to play around with this, feel free to play around with this stuff. But that's a way to limit some of these results here, make it look a little more attractive. Okay? And again, take your time. I'm just quickly clicking on stuff and I see things I don't like. You can also turn on the river names, play around, with that, and the lake names and things like that. Experiment. Your final product that you're going to turn in doesn't have to have all these labels on there. You can, leave some on, have some off, but at least play around with it to get a sense of what's going to look the best here, right? And then once you've successfully played around with this and you're feeling pretty good, well, first hit save, and then click on the layout view right there. And so this brings you over here and you can see we've got our page. So this is if I were to hit print, this would be the sheet of, I say that because look at it, my God. But this would be the sheet of letter sized paper that it would be printed out on. And this is what I would see on there. And so you can see, I spent all this time zooming in over in data view, and now it's different here. That's how this stuff works. Now what you can do is just click back on this zoom in thing and do the same thing up here. Do that rectangle, bring it in there. Beautiful, right? I can do that. Here's a deal though. You'll notice now that I'm in layout view, you also have access to this zoom in one. But this is actually going to zoom into the page, right? So and you can see that magnifying glass, it has this different thing. But it's the idea if you want to zoom in to that corner of the page to make sure that, something you're putting in there looks just right. I can't use this to zoom in to the map on the page. It's just zooming into the page. Does that make sense? And again, the blue arrow back to that extent. You can do, zoom whole page. It's those 4 arrows going out there. This pan one is the deal. You can just move the page. You notice South America isn't changing in where it is in the page, but if I do this one and I do that, page stays still and that moves around, right? So it takes a little getting used to, but it actually does make life easier when you have these two separate things right there. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So I'm going to zoom in, get it tight. I like that. That looks pretty good. But then I'm also, I'm not totally done here. I need map stuff on here, right? So we're going to mess with that. Now, another thing too, though, is it gives you all of this border around here. That's cowardly. I don't know why it does this. What you can do, click on this select elements arrow, and then you see these bluish, teal, whatever little boxes here. You notice my arrow changes, right? I can click and drag over here, and I just want to, I want to make the most of my page. And you can really obsess over it, and you see, in fact, let me do this. I've got this dotted line thing here. In theory, that's the printer I have set up here. That's the margin. So if I go past that, it's going to be cut off, right? But if I go up to it, that could be pretty cool. I could really maximize the space there, right? And to make sure you absolutely get to it, what you can do, if I click up here in the rulers up here, it'll make these little blue, it won't even let me go all the way over there. Okay, fine. It'll make these little blue guidelines, right? And so you could do something, go like that, and that way, when I start to drag it, let me bring it over here so you can really see, it'll snap to those, right? If I really want to measure out where I want to have this. And if you don't like this, if you realize, actually this is terrible, right click up here, clear guide, or even clear all guides, and it'll get rid of anything up there. Do the same thing over here, and then you're good, right? And then you could really force it like that if you want. All right, that's the idea. So, but play around with it. We don't care about white space on your page. We want to see your map, right? And you'll notice too, as I did this, as I start to change the map frame, right, or neat line here, or map space, it's changing the scale in here. So I might need to go back in once I've got all that and do this again. And maybe it's frustrating. Maybe I need to pan. This is what you do, right? If you want a map, something that looks good, you're going to have to obsess over it. You're going to have to do this kind of work, all right? Also, if you have, say, a set scale, we'll talk about scale a little later. Here when we really talk about data, I think maybe next week. But you can get in here and you can pick from these preset scales. You can also get in here and just manually change it, right? Hit enter. It's not going to be really noticeable based on what I did, but you can make it a little rounder up there. Again, we'll get into what all this means later on, but that's how you can get this right. And once you have this all right, you're like, yeah, that looks good. And maybe you look at it and you're like, oh man, but now the font, I don't like it. You can still go back in here. You go into properties, let it think, go into labels, and like, yeah, 12, I don't like it. Maybe I want to do 14 now, right? And I do that. And if you want to get a sense of really what it looks like, you can hit this zoom to 100%. And it's the idea that if you're holding the sheet of paper, this is what it's going to look like for you. You follow? That's the idea there. So play around with all that. And then once you've got all that done, now we're going to add some map elements. So if you go up here to insert, you're going to have these options in here. Okay? You don't need to use all of these things. In fact, my God, don't use all of these things. But a few useful things can be a north arrow, which in this case, yes, we can use. It's not really necessary, but they look cool, so we can do it. And I'll get into why it's not necessary. I'm going to talk about when to use them, when not to use them in future weeks, because you don't always want it, but it is kind of fun. And you can pick, they have a variety of these things in here. I would suggest simpler is always better. I mean, if you're going for some kind of, old-timey map, you can go, I've always liked this one. That's kind of nice. You can also pick one that doesn't have the north, east, southwest stuff and put your own text boxes in there, like whatever you want to do. But you can hit OK. It's thinking. Probably should have hit save last time. There we go. And it's going to bring it in here and let me hit save real quick. Just be aware too that this might look small to you, but that's good. You want these things small, these elements. Your main focus should be on South America itself, right? There's a tendency to have this cool thing because it looks better on your laptop screen or whatever to do something like this. But that's going to look absurd when you actually, if you were to print this map or when you export the PDF. So you want to keep everything still readable, right? But not extreme. Okay, so you can play around with these things. And I'm not going to make any requirements here for scale bars or this stuff in terms of what you add and how you do it, but you can play around with these things. Scale bar, pick something, put that in if you want. If you like the way it looks, right? But whatever you put down here, what we want to do, this is just a good bit of practice to get into. What you want to do is have some kind of box, some kind of container down here where you're going to put all this stuff, okay? And really, I should have done this first, but I got excited and I put my north arrow in there, but it's okay. We can fix it. So what I want to do is from my drawing toolbar, which I turned on last video, but if you don't have it, just right click in the just blank gray up here and it's draw. Click that, right? You can also go, what is it? Customize, yeah, customize toolbars. You can get it that way. But you want to have this draw toolbar right here because we want to have this rectangle tool. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and draw just like I'm doing my that zoom in thing, right? Left click, hold, and drag. And I'm going to put in this rectangle somewhere down here in the corner. And South America is perfect because of the way the continent kind of cuts back in down there in the south. I've got this space in the ocean here, as long as I'm not blocking any important features out in the ocean. I can just slap this in here and I can put all of my map elements, my title, north arrow, whatever I've got. I can put this stuff in here and that way it's neat and it's all in one spot. And again, the focus is going to be up here. But if I need to know where is north or what's 20 miles or 10 kilometers or something like that on this map, I can do that, right? Okay, so with this, I'm going to, I draw this, okay? Since I already have my north arrow here, it's that whole drawing order issue. I can't see it. But if I right click on the rectangle and I go to order, send backward, if I go all the way send it back, it'll be underneath the map itself. But I just hit send backward, beautiful, right? So now it draws rectangle, then my north arrow, and anything else I add, if I do, like we could do scale text. This looks kind of cool, this absolute scale right here. I can add that, and I can bring that there, and it's all going to be on top of the rectangle, right? Again, we'll talk about scale, talk about these different elements, why you would do it later on. Right now, we're just seeing what we could do, okay? Also, I don't know why, it defaults to this yellow color and a gray border. If you double click on that, which is what I just did there, you can pick whatever, right? Do something subtle. You don't want it to totally blend in with the background, but you also don't want it to stand out too much, right? So maybe I do a slightly darker gray than the gray I use there. So it's, right, you see what I'm doing there? It doesn't shout at you, right? But you can still see, okay, this isn't the ocean I'm looking at. This is something different. All right, then what you can do, a few different ways to do this, but the easiest way, just this text box, you can just click right there where it says text, hit backspace, and I'm going to put South America. All right, now that's tiny. Is it 8 point? No, Arial 10 point in there. If I double click on it, I can change it. Now, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do here. I mean, you can change if I spelled something wrong, right? If it was like South America, I could go in here and change that. But this change symbol is where I can get in and actually, pick something that's going to look good. We'll talk about font type, all of this stuff later on. Again, as I said, Pick something that isn't going to be, aggressive or whatever, kind of goes with your map, right? Picks a size that's going to work here. Let's try that. Maybe I like that. Maybe I want to go bigger or whatever. You can mess around with it. But what you should do in here, at the very least, put in a title. Let me know what I'm looking at. Put in your name on here. Again, text box, right? Your name in there somewhere. Now, typically, you're not going to put your name on a map. It's not what we do. It's not how we roll. You might put your agency or company or something on the map to have that credit, but we don't put individual cartographer names in there. I don't know, because we're so humble or whatever. But in here, just so if I'm grading it, I know exactly who to give points to, you're going to add your name. At the very least, have that, but feel free. Put in the north arrow or compass rose. Put in some, a scale bar, scale text. Put in, whatever you want in there. Play around with this stuff. There's a legend option. It's very clunky, but you can mess around with that if you want. I just recommend, before you add anything, hit save, so that if it is a disaster and you get to a point where you don't even know what you did, you can just close it without saving, open up that saved version again. Okay, so get this how you want it. Make it look nice. Feel free, if you need to, shrink down your rectangle, right? And reposition this stuff so that the goal is this is going to look sexy at the end. And just be aware, if you're going to move everything at the same time, I'm just hitting shift and left clicking everything. And once I've got all of that, then I can move it and it'll all go together, right? If I just click this and move it, it leaves everything behind. So, it can be a pain, but that's what we do. Okay? Once you have made a map of South America and you look at it and you're like, this is great. I love this, right? I think this looks very attractive. This is exactly what I want. Or you're like, you know what? I've been working for 5 hours. I still hate this thing. I don't like the labels. I don't like this or whatever. Don't kill yourself on it. But as long as you make something that you are proud of and that does not have all of these defaults in there, that looks unique, right? Not like you spent 2 seconds adding stuff in. Once you've done all that, we'll hit save one more time, right? But then what I want you to do is go up to File and Export Map, okay? Click on that. It's thinking. And then you have these options in here, a whole host of files. Some of these will make sense to you, some won't. But what you're going to do with everything in here is I want you to save your maps as PDFs. All right? You can leave all of this stuff to the defaults. We don't need to worry about, DPI, security stuff, any of that stuff. Just leave the defaults in there and save it, like it's automatically going there. But you save it in that South America folder. And you notice it's giving it the same name as my MXD. That's why I put Paces in the MXD, my last name, in there. But when it's where it's going to be, I'm going to hit save. And it's thinking. You can see the status thing down there at the bottom. And then it'll say something like export complete when it's done. Beautiful. Yeah, export complete down in the lower left right there. And so what I can do then is go back into my Windows Explorer thing here. So it won't, let's check with this version here, but even if I hit refresh, yeah, you're not going to see the PDF in there. PDF, it's invisible for ArcGIS. But if I go back in here into my Windows Explorer, I see this right here. And so that's, if I double click that, you'll see my map, but it's a PDF. And it actually looks cleaner, sharper, and that's because really what you'll learn is that ArcGIS, it's not designed for attractive cartographic products. It's really great for data analysis, manipulation, getting answers, making charts, that kind of stuff. But final products, they look better in like Adobe software, right? But you can see this looks a lot sharper right here. And when you look at it, if it's great and it's what you wanted it to look like and you're happy with it, then You're going to go into Canvas, right? You can go into assignments. I think this will work. It'll look a little different for you all, but in this, week 2 South American map, go in there. You hit, I think, start assignment, and it'll show you where you can upload your PDF. And you turn that in, and you're good. You are good for this assignment. You dig? All right, guys. I hope that made sense. Luckily, you can pause. You can go back, and if I did something in here and it doesn't fully make sense, watch it a few times. If it's still not working or whatever, as always, contact me. Communicate with me however it is best for you, and I'll help you through it, right? We can work together. And also, feel free. Students, reach out to each other. I think you have access to do that through Canvas. Work together on this stuff, right? Turn in your own map. I want you doing your own work, but you're all struggling with this. For most of you, this is the first time you've really used this software, so you're all going through the same struggle. Feel free to work together, right, to make that struggle a little more manageable. Okay, sound good, geographers? All right, happy mapping. Enjoy. Work with it, struggle with it, curse it, but when you get to something you're okay with stopping with, whether because you love it or you're frustrated, export that as a PDF, turn it in. I'm looking forward to seeing it.